The Young and the Restless spoilers. Oh, now this is getting fascinating, and you're absolutely right to think the writers of The Young and the Restless might be playing a much longer, more intricate game here. With that layer of subtext, let's dive deeper. I'll expand on your newest ideas and incorporate them into the next part of the narrative, Cain possibly being more than just a pawn or a victim, maybe even the architect of an even more twisted, layered plan. This will be a continuation in long, intense prose, exploring the implications of Cain's deeper strategy, the role of Phyllis, Holden Novak's mysterious role, the Newman connection, and the possibility that the poisoning incident was just one move in a much bigger game. Let's begin. The second glass in the hidden blade, Cain's quiet war. What if Cain Ashby wasn't the man everyone thought he was? What if the broken-hearted ex-husband, the wrongfully accused, the framed pawn at the center of Damian's collapse was playing a game more dangerous, more deliberate, and more devastating than anyone had yet dared to consider? Because now the pieces didn't just fall into place, they slid there, like chessmen in the hands of a master. Damian was still alive. That was important. But more important was that everyone believed Cain might have wanted him dead. And that belief, fed by 1,000 misinterpreted glances and the slow-burn fury of a man scorned, had become a narrative with momentum all its own. Cain didn't need to kill Damian. He just needed the illusion of intent, the echo of threat, the question whispered in back rooms, did Cain do it? Because while everyone chased that question, they weren't asking the bigger ones. Like why Cain had brought Chance into the labyrinth that night. Or why, despite being shaken by the poisoning, Cain seemed almost eerily composed once Damian was carted off. Or why Phyllis Summers, of all people, had suddenly re-entered the story, carrying secrets that could shatter the carefully crafted facades of the Newman Empire. Phyllis had said more than she should have. But Cain was counting on that. In the haze of whispered guilt and moral righteousness, Phyllis needed someone to unburden herself to, and Cain had always been that slippery figure with just enough charm and just enough ruin to be both safe and dangerous. She told him everything, how Newman Enterprises had quietly investigated Damian's sudden real estate acquisitions in Genoa City, how Victor himself had flagged the rapid expansion as a potential front for laundering or worse, and how someone, an associate linked to Damian, had been seen making cash deals under a fake name tied to Holden Novak. Holden Novak. The ghost with muddy footprints. A name no one had spoken in Genoa City for over a year, presumed to be a failed con artist, a whisper in the corners of club society, a man who had once owed Cain a favor, and who now, apparently, was back. But back doing what? If Phyllis's information was accurate, Holden had resurfaced just before the poisoning incident. He'd been spotted meeting someone near the waterfront. Someone with ties to the Dumas cartel. And then he vanished again, only to reappear hours later, near one of the Newman-owned properties that Damian had quietly purchased under a shell corporation. And Cain? Cain didn't seem surprised. Not at all. That's when Chance began to feel the familiar chill of manipulation tightening around his neck. Maybe this wasn't a game about love, or betrayal, or even survival. Maybe this was something far more meticulous. Because Cain had always been clever. But lately, he'd been calculated. The poisoning? It wasn't a misstep, it was a mirror. Something to reflect public suspicion back onto Cain just enough to muddy the waters. It bought him time. Sympathy. Freedom. And while everyone was busy questioning whether or not Cain had tried to kill Damian in a drunken haze of jealousy, Cain was quietly laying groundwork. Talking to the right people. Visiting the right properties. Asking the wrong questions to the right men. Whispering things into ears that never made it to the press. Why? Because Cain didn't need to be innocent. He just needed to look unstable enough to disarm suspicion, while being sharp enough to pull strings behind the curtain. And the strings were pulling tighter now. At the center of it all, Holden Novak. If what Cain suspected was true, Holden wasn't just a pawn. He was the blade. The man who delivered messages in the form of accidents. The man who had cleaned up after more than one mistake in the Dumas Empire, and who now might be trying to clean up Cain. Unless, of course, they were working together. Because no one had seen Holden the night Damian collapsed. But someone had turned off the surveillance camera at the vineyard an hour before. Someone had tampered with the wine glass. And someone had moved a body 3 days earlier from a hotel in Marseille, connected to the same real estate holding group Damian had used. So what if Cain knew about the attempt on his life? What if he invited it? And what if Damian just happened to pick the wrong glass? The idea began to take root inside Chance like a poison of its own. He'd been so focused on protecting Cain, on proving his innocence, that he hadn't considered the possibility that Cain wasn't playing defense at all. He was playing offense. And it made sense. Every move. Every word. Cain's whispered panic. His calls to be believed. His insistence that he was being hunted. He wasn't being hunted. He was baiting the hunter. Which left just one question: for whom? Newman? Dumas? Or someone no one had even seen coming? Because there was another whisper surfacing now, tied to Lily, to Chancellor Winters, to the billions sitting beneath the surface of Genoa City's corporate waters. Someone was moving pawns in a game too large for any one player. And if Cain wasn't the king, he was damn well trying to take the throne. He'd laid his groundwork in whispers. He'd gotten Phyllis to talk. He'd gotten Damian to fall. He'd gotten Chance involved, first as ally, now as unwilling accomplice. And if Holden Novak was back in town, there was a job being done behind the scenes. Someone was being watched. Or silenced. Or worse. And somewhere, quietly, Cain Ashby was already planning his next move. Because in the end, it didn't matter who drank the poisoned wine. All that mattered was who poured it. Let me know if you'd like the next installment, where Chance confronts Cain about Holden Novak, or we follow Holden's storyline in Genoa City as he cleans up a new mess that implicates someone shocking, like Devon, Tucker, or even Nick. Or perhaps we take Lily's perspective and show her slowly unraveling the lie behind Cain's supposed heartbreak. Absolutely. Let's now craft a long-form, suspenseful English-language narrative that deeply explores this central murder mystery in The Young and the Restless, the shocking death of Damian Cain, and the tangled web of jealousy, deception, and danger surrounding it. The structure will reflect the emotional fallout for Cain Ashby, the rising tension for Chance Chancellor as he investigates, and the looming question of whether Lily Winters will ever forgive Cain or suspect him. This will be written with immersive, dramatic flow, in long paragraphs, exceeding 10,000 characters to match your style preference. Deadly obsession. The murder of Damian Cain and the fallout that follows. There were only 2 glasses of wine in the maze that night, and only 1 corpse by the time the moonlight cut through the hedges. Damian Cain's body was found sprawled across the cold gravel path, a knife embedded between his shoulder blades, his eyes wide with horror, his fingers still twitching as if trying to grasp what had just occurred. He didn't die from the wine. He didn't even get the chance. He died from the blade, and that blade was thrown with precision, by a hand that knew exactly what it was doing, and exactly when to strike. The moment had been chosen with purpose. At the height of confusion, with both Damian and Cain Ashby reeling from a drug neither expected. But someone else had been watching. Waiting. Ready to kill. Now, Genoa City buzzed with questions no one could answer. Who murdered Damian Cain? And more importantly, why? On the surface, the suspect was obvious. Cain Ashby. The jilted ex-husband. The jealous lover. The man who had been humiliated again and again as Lily Winters moved on with Damian. The man who, just hours before Damian's death, had warned him in no uncertain terms to stay away from Lily. And the man who invited him out to the secluded maze in the south of France under the pretense of sharing a drink, only for Damian to end up dead. Every detail screamed motive. Every expression on Cain's face, replayed endlessly on security footage and dissected online, seemed to flicker between grief and calculation. And to make matters worse, Damian himself had reportedly accused Cain of trying to poison him just moments before he died. Chance Chancellor was the first official on the scene, and he arrived to find chaos. Cain frantic but strangely coherent. A shattered glass. A poisoned bottle. A corpse with a knife still cooling in the night air. And, importantly, no witnesses, just questions. The wine had been tampered with, that much was clear. But not enough to kill. Not immediately. It had been laced with a fast-acting sedative, enough to disorient both men. A perfect distraction for a killer to strike from the shadows. But who would want Damian dead? And if the poison wasn't meant for him, could Cain have been the real target? That was the question no one wanted to ask, because it introduced a much darker idea, that someone knew Cain's emotional state well enough to predict the meeting, manipulate the timing, and set a trap that would ensure Cain was blamed. While the true killer disappeared into the darkness. Still, the optics were damning. Cain had motive. He had opportunity. And he had rage, the kind that doesn't always show itself in screams, but in the cold calculation of a man who feels like he has nothing left to lose. After all, everyone knew about the confrontation just days earlier. Cain had cornered Damian outside Crimson Lights and made it clear that Lily belonged with him, that Damian was a temporary distraction, and that when things fell apart, and they would, she would come back to the only man who had ever truly understood her. That public outburst had been witnessed by 3 different customers, all of whom confirmed Cain's language was aggressive, if not threatening. Then came the invitation. Cain asked Damian to meet him privately. Said he wanted to talk it out like men. No one saw them leave, but a security camera at the train station captured the 2 of them walking together toward the private vineyard where the maze was located. And after that? Only blood and speculation. The media descended almost instantly. Headlines screamed ex-husband jealous rage turns deadly and love triangle ends in murder. Overnight, Cain became a pariah, a walking symbol of toxic obsession. And yet, through it all, he insisted. I didn't kill Damian. Someone wants me to take the fall. But if Cain didn't kill Damian, who did? The investigation turned up no immediate fingerprints on the knife. The handle was clean. The trajectory of the throw indicated the killer had been within 20 feet, hidden behind the hedge, perhaps even watching through the thinned vines. The wine bottle had both Cain and Damian's prints, just as expected. No sign of a struggle. No other DNA at the scene. But something bothered Chance. The angle of the knife throw was too perfect. Too practiced. This wasn't someone panicking. This was someone trained. That's when things got darker. Someone broke into Phyllis Summers' suite that night. No valuables were taken, but her laptop was wiped. Phyllis had been the one to tell Cain that Newman Enterprises had been monitoring Damian's activities. She'd also mentioned that someone, perhaps a man named Holden Novak, had been seen entering and leaving properties connected to Damian's new holdings. Those properties, it turned out, were registered under a European shell company with indirect ties to Aristotle Dumas, the international puppet master Cain had once impersonated. And here the narrative splintered. One theory, supported by some in law enforcement, was that Cain had planned to poison Damian, but someone else got to him first. Maybe Dumas saw Damian as a threat. Maybe Holden Novak, known fixer and enforcer, had been sent to clean up the mess. But if so, why not kill both men? Why let Cain live? Another theory, whispered among Newman insiders, suggested that Damian had been working against Victor Newman, using Lily's trust to gain access to privileged corporate data. If Victor had gotten wind of this, if Phyllis had shared too much too soon, if someone had decided that Damian was too much of a liability, then this murder might have had nothing to do with Cain at all. But that didn't stop the public from vilifying him. And what about Lily? Lily Winters stood in the middle of a war she never asked for. The man she had finally allowed herself to care for was dead. The man she once loved, and maybe still did, in the deepest corners of her heart, was the prime suspect. Her grief was eclipsed only by her confusion. She knew Cain. Or she thought she did. But what kind of man invites another to drink, watches him collapse, then calmly insists they were both poisoned? Was that remorse, or damage control? She confronted Cain in custody. Her hands trembled, but her voice was clear. Did you plan this? Was this about me? Cain didn't answer at first. He looked at her with hollow eyes, the ring she once gave him still hidden in the folds of his palm. He whispered finally, I didn't kill him. But someone knew I'd be blamed. Someone knew you'd hate me for it. And perhaps he was right. The killer had done more than take a life, they'd destroyed a connection that still lingered in shadow. Now Chancellor races against time. Rumors swirl that Cain may be formally charged. The DA is under pressure. The public wants justice. And yet, no solid proof exists. And worse, there are whispers that another target may be next. Someone is tying up loose ends. Someone wants Cain silenced, or caged. And if Chance doesn't figure it out soon, Lily herself may become the next name on a killer's list. Because maybe it was never about Damian. Maybe it was always about who he got too close to. And who he trusted, too late.